325 days. That's how long Edward VIII was King of England before he made the most shocking decision in modern royal history. He gave up the most powerful throne in the world for a twice-divorced American woman named Wallis Simpson. But was it really about love, or was there something deeper driving the only voluntary royal abdication of the 20th century? This isn't just a love story, it's a tale of duty versus desire, tradition versus modernity, and a decision that changed the course of British history forever. The man who was never supposed to be king became king, and the man who was born to rule walked away from it all. Let's explore the real story behind Edward VIII's abdication. Born in 1894, Prince Edward, Albert, Christian, George, Andrew, Patrick, David, known to his family as David, was never really cut out for kingship. Even as a child, he rebelled against royal protocol, preferring casual clothes to formal dress and modern ideas to ancient traditions. As Prince of Wales, Edward was charismatic and popular with the public. He was seen as a modernizing force, the first royal to master public relations in the modern sense. He toured the empire extensively, charmed crowds worldwide, and seemed to represent a new, more approachable monarchy. But behind the public persona, Edward was deeply troubled. He struggled with the weight of expectations, had difficulty with commitment, and showed little interest in the constitutional duties that would define his reign. Multiple relationships had failed, and at 40, he remained unmarried, unusual for an heir to the throne. His father, King George V, reportedly said, "After I am dead, the boy will ruin himself within 12 months. It would prove to be remarkably prescient. In 1931, Edward met Wallis Warfield Simpson at a house party. She was 37, married to her second husband, Ernest Simpson, and everything the royal establishment feared in a potential queen. Wallis was American, which was problematic enough for the British establishment of the 1930s. She was also a commoner, which violated centuries of royal marriage traditions. Most damaging of all, she was divorced, and not just once, but working on her second divorce. Their relationship developed slowly but intensely. By 1934, they were inseparable. Edward showered her with expensive gifts, including stunning jewelry that would later become legendary. He began including her in official events, treating her as his unofficial consort, despite her married status. The affair was an open secret in London society, but the British press maintained a respectful silence, a courtesy that would not last forever. January 20, 1936, King George V died, and Edward became King Edward VIII. He inherited not just a crown, but a constitutional crisis waiting to happen. By this time, Wallis had begun divorce proceedings against Ernest Simpson. Edward's intention to marry her was becoming clear, and the establishment was horrified. The Archbishop of Canterbury, the Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin, and the royal household all opposed the match. The problems were multiple and seemingly insurmountable. Constitutional crisis. As king, Edward was the head of the Church of England, which did not recognize divorce. Marrying a divorced woman would create an unprecedented constitutional conflict. Political opposition. The British government, led by Prime Minister Baldwin, made it clear they could not support such a marriage. Baldwin famously told the king that the people would never accept Wallis as queen. Commonwealth concerns. The Dominion governments, Canada, Australia, South Africa, and others, were consulted and uniformly opposed to the marriage. Public opinion. While Edward was popular, Wallis was not. The British public saw her as a foreign interloper who had somehow ensnared their king. Edward explored various compromise solutions, including a morganatic marriage, where Wallis would become his wife but not queen. All were rejected by the government. By December 1936, it was clear that Edward faced an impossible choice: give up Wallis or give up the throne. On December 10, 1936, Edward signed the instrument of abdication. The next day, December 11th, he delivered one of the most famous speeches in royal history via BBC radio. I have found it impossible to carry the heavy burden of responsibility and to discharge my duties as king as I would wish to do without the help and support of the woman I love. The speech was masterfully crafted, portraying his decision as both personal sacrifice and royal duty. He claimed he could not be an effective king without Wallace by his side. Therefore, his abdication was actually in service to the crown and country. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Some saw it as the ultimate romantic gesture, a king giving up his throne for love. Others viewed it as a dereliction of duty and a betrayal of his coronation oath. Within hours of the abdication, Edward's younger brother Albert became King George VI, the father of the current King Charles III. While the official story is about love conquering duty, historians have uncovered more complex motivations behind Edward's decision. Escape from royal duty. Edward had never wanted to be king. The abdication gave him a socially acceptable way to escape responsibilities he found burdensome. Some biographers suggest he was relieved to have an excuse to step down. Political sympathies. Edward had concerning political views, including apparent sympathy for Nazi Germany. Some historians argue that the establishment was quietly relieved to see him go, as his political judgment was questionable. Personal inadequacies. Edward struggled with the constitutional aspects of kingship. He was impatient with paperwork, dismissive of protocol, and showed little understanding of his role as a constitutional monarch. Modern versus traditional. The crisis represented a clash between modern ideas about marriage and happiness versus traditional concepts of duty and sacrifice. Edward chose personal fulfillment over institutional obligation. Wallace's influence. Some evidence suggests Wallace herself was ambivalent about becoming queen and may have encouraged Edward to find a way out that preserved both their relationship and his dignity. The consequences of the abdication were immediate and lasting. Personal exile, Edward became the Duke of Windsor and lived in permanent exile. He and Wallace married in France in 1937, but she was never granted the title Her Royal Highness, a deliberate snub that Edward never forgot. Family rift. The abdication created lasting tensions within the royal family. Edward's brother, now King George VI, struggled with the burden of kingship he never expected to bear, while dealing with a world war and his own speech impediment. Constitutional change. The abdication led to changes in succession law and reinforced the principle that the monarch's personal desires must be subordinate to constitutional duty. Historical impact. George VI's successful reign, particularly during World War II, arguably strengthened the monarchy. His daughter Elizabeth became one of Britain's most respected monarchs, suggesting the abdication may have ultimately benefited the crown. The Windsor marriage. Edward and Wallace's marriage lasted until his death in 1972, though it was reportedly troubled by his bitterness over his treatment by the royal family and her frustration with their exile. Modern historians have reassessed Edward's abdication with more nuanced perspectives. Character flaws. Rather than a romantic hero, Edward is now often seen as a weak king who prioritized personal happiness over public duty. His later sympathy for Nazi Germany has particularly damaged his historical reputation. Alternative history. Some historians argue that Edward remaining as king during World War II could have been disastrous, given his political views and poor judgment. Wallace's role. Simpson is now viewed less as a calculating American adventuress and more as a woman caught in an impossible situation, dealing with pressures no one should face. Institutional success. The crisis ultimately demonstrated the monarchy's ability to adapt and survive even its greatest challenges, with the smooth transition to George VI proving the institution's resilience. Edward VIII's abdication established principles that still guide the British monarchy today. Personal desires must be balanced against institutional duties. The monarch serves at the pleasure of the people and government. Modern royal marriages require careful consideration of public opinion. The crown is bigger than any individual who wears it. These lessons influenced how later royals handled their own romantic challenges, from Princess Margaret's relationship with Peter Townsend to more recent royal marriages that would have been impossible in Edward's era. Edward VIII's abdication was officially about love, but it was really about the fundamental nature of monarchy in the modern world. His choice to prioritize personal happiness over duty created a constitutional crisis that ultimately strengthened the institution he abandoned. In choosing love over the crown, Edward VIII changed the course of history and, arguably, Britain got the better king in his brother George VI. Do you think Edward VIII made the right choice? Was it true love or an escape from duty? How do you think history would have changed if he had remained king? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more royal history deep dives. What other royal scandals would you like us to explore? Thanks for watching.